A protection order is supposed to be a person's first line of defense against abuse. But is it worth the paper it is written on? And is it wise to get a protection order against someone? In this video, I will go over some of the research done on the effectiveness of protection orders. What is a protection order? A protection order, also called a restraining order, is a legal intervention given out by a court to reduce the risk of future threat, abuse, exploitation, harassment, or harm to the person seeking the protection order. Although around 84 to 92% of protection orders are issued for domestic violence, protection orders can be issued against any person or even a company. It may be a neighbor or stranger harassing you, a customer harassing staff, or elderly abuse, where an elderly person is physically or financially abused, often by their own children. What is a protection order used for? Protection orders have a wide scope. As already mentioned, it is mainly to order someone to stop harassment, abuse, and slander. Think of it as a kid bullying another kid, and a parent steps in and warns the bullying kid to stop. The court is the parent. The abuser is the bullying kid, and the petitioner or victim is the kid who was bullied. Although just like kids, there is no guarantee that the warning would be heeded. However, just like a kid who was warned, action is taken quicker if the warning is not heeded, and punishment is often more severe than if no warning was given. However, protection orders can also be used to bar someone from a place or make any contact with a person, to evict a person from a shared residence, to award temporary custody of minor children, establish temporary visitation rights, grant the petitioner temporary alimony or child support, or bar the abuser access to the victim's financial accounts. Thus, an abuser can be ordered to give immediate financial support to a person who they financially abuse, such as refusing to give them money for food. It can also order the abuser to repay or pay for medical and counseling bills incurred by the victim as a result of the abuse. Lastly, it can also order the abuser to partake in mental health treatment or counseling. How long does a protection order last? It depends on the country you are in, but normally there are 4 kinds of protection orders. An emergency order often lasts up to 7 weekdays. A temporary order often lasts for around 3 weeks. A restraining or full protection order lasts for around 1 to 3 years but can be renewed. A permanent order is for life of either party. Consequences for violating a protection order. Depending on the country you are in and the type of protection order you have, violations of a protection order range from civil contempt penalties to a misdemeanor or felony criminal charges. Protection orders are also countrywide, thus if a protection order is violated over county lines, it can be a federal crime. In some instances, a warrantless arrest can be done and punishment range from fines to imprisonment. Does a protection order work? A protection order is an order by a court. Its effectiveness is measured in the number of violations and the specific nature of the violations, such as was there verbal contact, property damage, psychological abuse, or physical violence. For this, we look to studies done on a meta-report of multiple studies based on court documents and police reports. From the data, it seems that there is little overall difference in abuse with a temporary protection order, with around a 3% drop in further abuse or violence when looking at all victims. However, there is a significant reduction in repeat abuse for victims who had not experienced severe prior abuse or injuries. With victims who obtained a 2-year protection order, there was a significant reduction in the levels of violence in the subsequent 18 months. A study that included long follow-up periods and involved 2,691 women found that intimate partner violence dropped by 80% a year after a permanent protection order was granted. Another study found that women with permanent protection orders were significantly less likely to be physically abused, threatened, or contacted compared to women who had reported intimate partner violence but had not obtained a protection order. What violation occurs? The type of violation is linked to what is ordered in the protection order. However, 2 of the most frequent violations are no contact and stalking. Violations are often highest directly after the order is served and in the first 3 months. Psychological abuse often increases drastically while a temporary protection order is in place, as the abuser tries to manipulate or threaten the victim to stop them from getting a 2-year or permanent protection order. Property damage, threatening, physical abuse, and even murder is a high risk when an emergency or temporary protection order is in place. However, women who maintain their protection orders reported at a 9-month follow-up a 70% reduction in physical abuse and a 60% reduction in psychological abuse. Thus, the longer the order is in place, the lower the likelihood of re-abuse or protection order violation. Factors affecting violations. Studies found that women of very low socioeconomic status experience a significant lesser decline in reported violence after a restraining order. It may be that the abuser feels they have less to lose being in a very low socioeconomic class, as well as their environment and friend circle influencing them to protect their ego. The presence of biological children increases the odds of reporting re-abuse by a factor of 4.5 in relationships lasting less than 5 years. Women with children are also more likely to experience violence, intimidation, and property damage, especially if a woman have sole custody over the children. Race also plays a role, with black women being at an elevated risk of renewed abuse after legal intervention. Drug use by the victim also increases the risk of re-victimization. Relationships over 5 years showed a reduction of re-abuse after an order was served, compared to shorter relationships, with relationships under 1 year experiencing the most re-abuse incidents. Abusers who frequently abused the victim are more likely to violate an order. If an order is violated, the more severe the abuse was before a protection order was obtained, the more severe the abuse during re-abuse and protection order violation. Reporting of incidents of violation also affects re-abuse. Victims who do not report violations, especially initial no-contact violations, are at a greater risk of re-abuse. Self-violation of orders, such as a victim responding to text, email or phone calls from the abuser or agreeing to meet them, also increase the risk of re-abuse. The abuser seems to think that the victim is not serious about the order, or that they can manipulate the victim in having the order dropped if the victim does not report minor violations to the police. If the abuser was arrested at the time of the incident leading to the protection order, there is a lower risk of re-abuse, as well as if the police seemed helpful and supportive towards the victim. If the abuser perceives that the police are on the victim's side, there is a lower risk of re-abuse. Abusers more likely to violate an order. If the abuser has a violent or criminal history, there is a high risk that the abuser will violate the protection order. Men are more likely to violate the protection order. Abusers who are not full-time employed, have a mental disorder, use drugs, or have a drinking problem are more likely to violate the protection order. The more the abuser's resistance to the protection order in court proceedings or when served the protection order, the higher the risk that they will violate the order, as well as the higher the probability of severe violence and psychological abuse when they do violate the order. Abusers who have already physically abused the victim are very likely to ignore a protection order and may react violently towards having one served on them. Conclusion on protection orders. A protection order is not a bulletproof vest. It is only an order by a court. The less the abuser cares about the law and consequences of their actions and their public image, the less likely they are to heed a protection order. Emergency and temporary protection orders do not seem to be that effective. There's a significant risk of violation in the first 3 months after getting a protection order. However, full protection orders lasting 2 to 3 years and permanent protection orders seem to be very effective in reducing the risk of future abuse. Not reporting violations to police, especially minor violations, increases the risk of future abuse. So file a police report for every violation, even if it's just a text message. If the abuser has physically abused you or threatened to harm you, expect them to violently react to the protection order and take appropriate safety precautions for at least the first 2 years. Most intimate partner homicides occur within 2 years of breakup. Also, if the abuser is resistant to the order in court or when it was served, expect the order to be violated. Extra care must be taken to ensure your safety. A protection order is not a fix-all solution. It is one part of a long-term safety plan. The victim needs to take additional safety steps such as changing locks, getting an alarm system, changing residence and contact details, and possibly arming themselves in some way. A subscription to a third-party armed rapid response security company can also be considered. The protection order will deter some abusers from re-abusing. For those who violate the protection order, it gives both police and the victim more room to respond to the abuse. Police will easier arrest an abuser if found on your property or harassing you in public if you have a protection order. A protection order also increases your self-defense argument should you need to donate some lead and have the abuser take the room temperature challenge. A protection order is like a safety belt. A safety belt does not work if not worn properly. A significant amount of victims do not go to the hearing to make a temporary order a full protection order. Wearing a safety belt can kill you, such as when it gets stuck and the car is on fire or sinking. Around 20% of abuse cases showed an increase of abuse and even murder after protection order was served. But most of the time, a safety belt increases your safety. Available research supports the conclusion that protection orders for the majority of cases do reduce the risk of violence toward the victim. However, just like a safety belt is no guarantee that you will not get hurt, you need to drive carefully and mindfully, a protection order is also no guarantee. You need to take additional steps to protect yourself.